Hey man, there's a truth most men don't discover until after the heartbreak settles, long after the nights where you lay awake wondering what he had that you didn't. It hits you slowly, painfully, quietly. She didn't leave you for a better man. She left you for a fantasy, a louder, shinier, more dramatic version of love she built in her own mind, not because he offered more, not because he treated her better, not because he was some incredible upgrade, but because he represented escape, excitement, illusion, something new she could project her emotions onto. And the most painful part, she didn't even fall for him. She fell for what she imagined he could be. You remember how confusing it felt. One day she was all in, talking about the future, holding your hand like she meant forever, making you feel like the center of her universe. And then suddenly, without warning, the energy changed. She grew distant, distracted, emotionally unavailable. You tried to understand it, thinking maybe you said something wrong or didn't do enough. But what you didn't realize is that she had already started fantasizing about someone else. Not necessarily another man she knew, but another version of love she felt drawn to. She wasn't comparing you to him, she was comparing you to a storyline in her head. And that's what breaks a man the most. You weren't competing against reality. You were competing against her imagination, against a version of love she created in her private emotional world. A world where passion never fades, where anxiety feels like chemistry, where unpredictability feels like desire. You were grounded, present, real. He was unfamiliar, unstable, untested. But because he was new, he made her feel something she mistook for connection. Not a deeper love, just a louder emotion. And loudness always wins when someone hasn't learned the difference between intensity and intimacy. The truth is, she didn't outgrow you. She outgrew the story she had written about you. The one where you were exciting in the beginning, mysterious at first, unpredictable before you opened your heart. But once she saw all of you, the good, the stable, the consistent, she mistook that stability for boredom. She mistook your calmness for lack of passion. She mistook your loyalty for predictability. And because she didn't understand her own emotional patterns, she convinced herself that something more exciting must exist somewhere else, not because you lacked value, but because she lacked emotional maturity. It's devastating to realize she didn't choose him because he was better. She chose him because he was easier to fantasize about. He was unknown, unexplored, free of the responsibilities that come with real love. She could imagine him being everything she wished you'd be, without actually seeing who he truly was. She wasn't attracted to him, she was attracted to the escape he represented. A way to run from discomfort, from accountability, from the work required to build something meaningful. Fantasy doesn't require effort, reality does. And she chose the one that demanded nothing from her. You probably tried to rationalize it. You probably thought he must be more confident, more charismatic, more attractive. But the truth is, most of the time, the other guy is nothing special. Half the time, he's inconsistent. Half the time, he's a rebound. Half the time, he's someone who won't even stay in her life. But he made her feel something momentarily. Something sharp, something intoxicating, something unfamiliar. She didn't fall for qualities, she fell for stimulation. And that kind of attraction burns out just as quickly as it ignites. Meanwhile, the steady, genuine love you offered was something she didn't know how to appreciate yet. What hurts the worst is how quickly she replaced you in her emotional storyline. How she went from calling you the best thing that ever happened to her, to acting like you never mattered. But that wasn't the real her. That was her escaping the guilt of her own decisions. When someone leaves for fantasy, they have to rewrite the past to justify their choice. They have to convince themselves that you weren't right for them, that you weren't enough, that the relationship was already broken, even when both of you know it wasn't. She didn't leave because you were lacking. She left because fantasy is easier to pursue when you erase the truth. What you need to understand is this: she didn't choose him over you. She chose a different feeling over the consistent presence you gave. You represented peace, but she wasn't ready for peace. She wanted adrenaline. She wanted anticipation. She wanted the emotional roller coaster she had mistaken for love her whole life. And he gave her the thrill she craved, not because he cared, not because he was better, but because he was temporary, because he was unstable, because he was unsafe, because he was unsafe. And unsafe emotions always feel stronger to someone who's never healed their emotional wounds. But here's the tragic twist she never saw coming. The fantasy always collapses. Eventually, the loudness fades, the excitement dulls, the projection breaks, and the man she chose starts to look less like a dream and more like the reality she wasn't ready to accept. That's when regret creeps in. Not immediate, not openly, but slowly, quietly. In moments where she remembers how steady you were, how reliable you were, how safe she felt with you. She won't admit it, but the fantasy she ran toward will never match the stability she ran from. And you know what makes this entire experience feel like a knife in the gut? She didn't just lose you, she lost the version of herself that you brought out. The softer side, the calmer side, the secure side. She traded that for a louder emotion, and now she's stuck chasing highs that never last. Meanwhile, you're here rebuilding, healing, strengthening. You're growing through the pain she caused. And the irony is, the man she tried to replace has become the man she'll regret losing the most. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. And real always outlasts fantasy. What you don't see, what you couldn't have seen, is how early the fantasy started forming in her mind. Long before she left, long before she grew distant, long before the arguments and confusion, she had already begun slipping into that emotional daydream where love feels effortless and thrilling and dramatic. And in that dream, you weren't the villain, you were simply too real, too grounded, too consistent. She didn't leave because she didn't care. She left because she couldn't tell the difference between excitement and instability. And when she finally jumped toward the fantasy, it wasn't a decision made from logic. It was an escape made from emotion. There were signs, small ones, but you didn't know how to recognize them. The way she started checking out mentally, the way she stopped listening fully when you spoke, the way she suddenly needed space, not because of you, but because she was feeding the fantasy inside her head. She was drifting long before she physically walked away. Her mind left the relationship, days, weeks, maybe months before her body did. And you, being the man who loved her, tried to hold on to something she had already let go of emotionally. You weren't losing her to another man, you were losing her to another version of herself. When she finally left, it didn't feel like a breakup, it felt like a betrayal of everything she said during the good days. You replayed every moment she looked into your eyes and said she loved you, every moment she reached for your hand in public, every moment she told you she felt safe with you, and you couldn't understand how someone could go from that level of connection to complete detachment. But that's what happens when someone chases fantasy. They disconnect from everything that anchors them to reality, and nothing anchors a person more deeply than real love, which is exactly why she had to detach from you. In her mind, you became the past chapter, not because you failed, but because fantasy requires a clean emotional slate. She couldn't fully dive into that idealized version of love while still holding on to the man who represented truth, stability, and commitment, so she rewrote the story. She convinced herself you weren't right for her. She convinced herself something was missing. She convinced herself she deserved more, even though she couldn't explain what that more actually was. Fantasy doesn't give reasons, it gives impulses. And she followed hers, even though it cost her the only man who ever showed up for her without pretending to be something else. What you don't realize yet is that the man she ran toward is not the threat. The emotional illusion she attached to him is, she isn't in love with him, she's in love with what he represents in her imagination. Maybe he's unpredictable, maybe he's confident, maybe he's emotionally unavailable. Whatever it is, she interprets it as passion because she hasn't grown out of mistaking chaos for chemistry. She's not drawn to him because of his substance. She's drawn to him because he gives her emotional spikes she's addicted to. It's not real connection, it's an emotional dopamine hit. There's a harsh moment after she leaves where you finally admit it to yourself. You were too stable for her instability, too steady for her internal storms, too grounded for her scattered emotions. She didn't leave because you lacked attraction or value. She left because she didn't know how to stay with someone who made her feel safe. Safety requires vulnerability. Stability requires commitment. Real love demands emotional maturity. And running into fantasy requires none of those things. Fantasy is easy, reality is work, and you represented the work she wasn't prepared to do. But as time passes, something shifts inside you. The sharp pain slowly transforms into clarity. You start seeing that nothing would have saved the relationship. Not more effort, not better communication, not more affection, because you weren't fighting for her love, you were fighting against her imagination. You can show up for a woman, you can love her well, you can build a life with her, but you cannot compete with a story she tells herself about a love that doesn't exist. And that's when the heaviness inside your chest begins to loosen, because you realize it wasn't your failure, it was her escape. What she doesn't know is that fantasy always collapses under the weight of reality. At first, she feels alive with this new version of love, the unpredictability, the thrill, the emotional chaos. But eventually, the cracks form. She starts noticing that he doesn't listen the way you did. He doesn't show up the way you did. He doesn't calm her storms. He creates new ones. Fantasy fades when reality enters the room, and when it does, she'll realize something she cannot undo. The connection she left wasn't broken. She was. But by the time she realizes this, you're no longer where she left you. You're not broken on the floor. You're not waiting to be chosen again. You're rebuilding slowly, painfully, but with intention. You're becoming the man you were meant to be before her chaos distracted you from your purpose. And here's the part she never expected. The moment her fantasy collapses is the same moment your self-worth returns. She lost you because she chose noise over depth, but you find yourself again because you no longer have to carry the weight of someone who couldn't carry her own emotions. In the end, she didn't leave you for a better man. She left you for a louder fantasy, one that will eventually quiet, fade, and crumble. But you will outlast all of it. Because while she ran toward an illusion, you stayed rooted in truth. And truth always wins. Not immediately, not loudly, but inevitably. One day, she'll look back and realize she walked away, not from perfection, not from failure, but from the one man who offered her a chance at something real. And the tragedy isn't that she left. The tragedy is that she won't find that version of love again. Not in fantasy, not in reality, not until she learns to stop running from the very thing she claimed she wanted. There's something almost surreal about the days after she leaves. You wake up expecting the world to feel different, but nothing outside has changed. Only everything inside you has. It's like your mind keeps trying to make sense of something that was never rational in the first place. Because how do you explain losing someone to a storyline in her own head? How do you process the fact that her decision wasn't a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of her emotional turbulence? You replay every moment, searching for the better man. But deep down, you know he wasn't better, just newer, louder, and easier to project dreams onto. That realization hurts, but it also frees you. And here's where the emotional damage really forms. You start doubting your own value. You start wondering if you were boring, if you were too stable, if you lacked excitement. But that's the trap, believing you needed to become chaos to keep someone who ran toward it. You weren't the problem. Your stability wasn't the problem. Your consistency wasn't the problem. The problem was that she confused peace with lack of passion. She confused emotional safety with emotional dullness. She didn't realize that the love you offered was the kind that lasts, not the kind that explodes and dies. She wasn't ready for a love that didn't threaten to break her. At some point, you start remembering everything you overlooked. The way she always seemed restless. The way she talked about wanting something more, but never defined what that more was. The way she was drawn to drama, to tension, to emotional swings that made her feel alive. You didn't see it then, because you were too busy loving her. But now, with distance, you finally understand. She wasn't searching for a partner. She was searching for stimulation. She wasn't choosing a man, she was choosing an emotional rush. And emotional rushes don't require depth, they require instability. What really reveals the truth is how quickly the cracks appear in her new love. At first, everything looks perfect. She posts more, she smiles more, she seems lighter, happier, almost glowing. And it stings because you think she found something you couldn't give her. But wait long enough, and you start to see the same patterns you once ignored. The emotional highs, followed by confusion, the lack of direction, the restlessness returning. Because a fantasy can carry someone far, but it can't carry them forever. Eventually, she realizes that the new man isn't a dream, he's just another person with flaws she chose not to see. Meanwhile, you're going through your own transformation. The loneliness, the confusion, the anger, they slowly start shaping you into someone sharper, someone wiser, someone more self-aware. You begin noticing your own patterns, how quickly you loved, how deeply you gave, how much you tolerated. And instead of turning bitter, you begin turning inward. You start reclaiming the parts of yourself you lost when you were busy trying to be everything she needed. That's when you realize something powerful. Losing her forced you to find yourself again. And as you rebuild, a new clarity forms. You don't want to be anyone's fantasy. You don't want to be a storyline in someone's emotional movie. You don't want to be idealized and then discarded when reality shows up. You want a woman who sees you as you are, your strength, your flaws, your ambition, your quiet moments. And that kind of love doesn't require drama, it doesn't require chaos, it doesn't require emotional theatrics, it requires maturity, it requires presence, it requires someone whose love isn't dependent on adrenaline. There's a surprising moment in healing where you stop wondering why she left and start wondering why you tried so hard to keep her. You realize that the version of love she chased wasn't sustainable, that the man she left for wasn't competing with you, he was competing with her imagination. And imagination always wins in the short term, but reality wins in the long term. You were offering something permanent, she was craving something temporary, and as painful as it was, you finally understand that losing someone who prefers fantasy is not a loss, it's protection. Over time, her return becomes predictable. Not necessarily in words, not in an apology, but in behavior. She'll orbit back around when the illusion fades, when the rush dies, when the better man stops feeling like a dream. She'll remember how calm you were, how grounded you made her feel, how secure life felt in your presence. And even if she never says it, she'll know she left something real for something loud. But by then, you won't be the man she left behind. You'll be stronger, harder to access, harder to impress, harder to shake. And the irony is, the silence she once mistook for boredom becomes the strength she now misses the most. Eventually, you stop checking her social media. You stop wondering where she is. You stop caring who she's with, because your life starts expanding again. Your confidence returns. Your routine stabilizes. You rediscover goals you abandoned. You learn to enjoy the quiet instead of fearing it. You realize that the man who lost her is not the same man who's rising from the ashes of that loss. And for the first time in a long time, you feel something you didn't expect. Gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the clarity. Not for her leaving, but for what her leaving forced you to become. And finally, when you look back, the truth is undeniable. She didn't choose a better man. She chose a louder illusion. Something bright enough to distract her, exciting enough to overwhelm her, chaotic enough to feel like love. But illusions burn fast, and you weren't meant to burn. You were meant to last. And the man who lasts will always rise above the man who shines for a moment. One day, she'll face the reality she ran from. And one day, you'll be grateful she did. Because while she chased fantasy, you built a life grounded in truth. And truth, unlike fantasy, doesn't disappear when the excitement fades. There comes a moment where you finally understand what you were really up against. Not another man, not another relationship, not even another version of you. What you were fighting was her craving for an emotional high, a feeling she mistook for connection. You represented reality, the slow burning kind of love that grows through consistency and patience. But she wanted fireworks, even if they burned her hands. She wanted passion, even if it came with instability. She wanted excitement, even if it collapsed the moment she got too close. And when you accept that truth, you stop blaming yourself for not being chaotic enough to entertain her inner world. As you heal, the guilt begins to melt away. You stop telling yourself you should have done more, should have been more exciting, more unpredictable, more emotionally reckless. That's not who you are. And pretending to be that man would have only delayed the breakup, not prevented it. She didn't need a stronger version of you. She needed a louder fantasy to distract her from her own emptiness. And the moment you realize that, you reclaim all the pieces of yourself you sacrificed, trying to hold on to someone who didn't want to be held by someone real. You start to see her differently too, not as a villain, not as someone who intentionally hurt you, but as someone who doesn't yet know how to sit with calm emotions, someone whose nervous system only recognizes love when it feels unpredictable, someone who mistakes peace for boredom because chaos is all she's ever known. She didn't reject you, she rejected the discomfort of emotional stability. That wasn't your flaw, it was her wound. And the more you understand that, the more compassion you feel, not for her, but for the version of you who tried to save her from battles she wasn't ready to face. The deeper truth is that fantasies don't require effort, they require imagination. And imagination can make a stranger feel like a soulmate, a conversation feel like chemistry, a compliment feel like destiny. But imagination collapses the second it meets responsibility. That's why fantasy burns bright and dies fast. And that's why reality feels heavier, but lasts longer. You weren't the spark she ran toward, you were the fire she wasn't prepared to maintain. And while that hurt back then, it becomes your peace later, because you realize the one who left couldn't have built anything real with you anyway. There's a strange shift that happens when you finally detach from her. The memories that once felt like knives now feel like lessons. You stop replaying the good days like they meant forever. You stop analyzing every conversation. You stop asking where you went wrong. Because nothing went wrong. It simply went where her emotional maturity allowed it to. She reached the limit of what she could offer. And while that limit broke you at the time, It was never meant to define you. It was meant to free you from building a life with someone whose heart was loyal only to her emotions in the moment. One day you wake up and feel something you haven't felt in a long time: neutrality. You think about her, and it doesn't burn anymore. It doesn't stab. It doesn't feel unfair. It feels like a chapter that ended exactly when it needed to. You realize that if she hadn't left, you would have continued shrinking yourself to keep her. You would have compromised your standards, your boundaries, your ambitions. You would have stayed in a relationship where you were the only one grounded in reality while she kept drifting into fantasy. Her leaving wasn't a loss, it was a release. And while she may one day look back with regret, your story doesn't revolve around her redemption. It revolves around your evolution. She may eventually see the truth, that the man she left wasn't perfect, but he was real in ways the fantasy never will be. She may realize how rare it is to find someone who loves quietly instead of loudly, someone who stays instead of impresses, someone who builds instead of entertains. But by the time that clarity reaches her, you'll already be standing in a place she no longer has access to. The men who grow the most are the ones who lose something they were never meant to keep. You learn how to walk differently in the world. You learn how to love without losing yourself. You learn how to give without bleeding. You learn how to be emotionally present without offering your entire identity. And most importantly, you learn that real love isn't built on emotional fireworks. It's built on emotional stability. You become the kind of man who doesn't chase illusions, because you've seen how easily illusions vanish when the light changes. Eventually, the fantasy she left for becomes just that, a fantasy she left for. Something she remembers with embarrassment, not admiration. Something she once believed in until reality revealed the truth behind the illusion. That other man won't stay. That rush won't last. That intensity won't build anything sustainable, because what she chased wasn't love, it was stimulation. And stimulation fades the moment the unpredictable becomes predictable, the moment the unknown becomes known, the moment the fantasy becomes another ordinary reality she has to face. And this is where your strength finally settles. She didn't replace you, she escaped you. Not because you were lacking, but because she wasn't ready for the type of man who doesn't live in fantasy. She left because you were real, and real love requires growth. She wasn't prepared to do. She chose louder emotions over deeper connections. She chose temporary spark over lasting warmth, and she chose a story over a partner. But you walked through the fire of that loss and came out carrying something she never will. Clarity. Clarity that you don't have to compete with fantasy to be enough. Clarity that what left your life was never meant to stay. And clarity that the man who stays true to reality will always win in the long run. There's a moment every man reaches after a breakup. A moment where the pain finally stops feeling personal. You stop thinking she rejected you and start understanding she rejected the version of love she wasn't equipped to maintain. You realize she didn't walk away because you failed her. She walked away because real connection demands emotional discipline, and she didn't have it yet. That realization hits differently. It doesn't make you bitter, it makes you wise. Because now you see how many times in your life you confused emotional chaos for passion, how many times you mistook inconsistency for interest, how many times you accepted instability because you believed it was a test of your devotion. But the truth is simpler. You were never meant to chase someone whose heart only works when tensions are high. When she left, you thought she was running toward a better life. That illusion kept you awake at night, imagining her laughing, glowing, falling in love all over again. You pictured her living a fairy tale without you, and that image crushed you more than anything she did. But as time passed, you learned that leaving wasn't her victory, it was her pattern, it was her escape, it was her cycle starting again. She didn't leave because she found something extraordinary, she left because she couldn't handle ordinary happiness. And once you understand that, all those fantasies you tortured yourself with disappear like smoke. You realize she wasn't living a perfect life. She was running from the same inner void she always carried. Something inside you hardens, but not in a bitter way, in a mature way. You develop a deeper respect for your own stability. You realize the patience you brought into the relationship wasn't weakness, it was emotional strength. Most people never develop. You learn that your consistency wasn't boring, it was the foundation she never knew how to stand on. And as you rebuild yourself, you begin to feel proud of how you handled everything. You didn't explode, you didn't beg, you didn't lose yourself trying to win her back. You faced the storm quietly and rebuilt in silence. That level of composure becomes the part of you she remembers forever. Not the memories, not the smiles, not the arguments, but the way you held your dignity, even when she shattered your heart. Her return, if it happens, won't come from a place of strength. It will come from the moment her fantasy stops entertaining her, when she sees that every man she turned to only amplified the comfort she walked away from. She'll remember the way you made life feel steady. She'll remember the way your presence grounded her when her emotions spun out of control. She'll remember the way you gave without trying to impress. And she'll realize she mistook comfort for monotony, loyalty for predictability, and peace for boredom. That's when her mind shifts, not because she suddenly matured, but because life forced her to recognize what she once had. But here's the part that transforms you. By the time she reaches that realization, you're not standing in the same place she left you. The heartbreak forced you to grow. The silence forced you to reflect. The loneliness forced you to rebuild your sense of worth from the ground up. You're no longer the man who waited for her message. You're no longer the man who replayed every moment, hoping to understand where you went wrong. You're someone who learned how to carry himself without needing validation. Someone who discovered life becomes clearer when you stop asking for answers from people who don't understand their own contradictions. There's a quiet power in moving on emotionally. Not the kind you announce, not the kind you perform on social media, but the kind that settles into your bones. You stop reacting. You stop caring whether she views your stories. You stop wondering what she thinks when she hears your name. That shift terrifies her more than any anger ever could, because she always believed she'd remain a central part of your emotional world. She thought her absence would keep echoing inside you, but when you detach, that echo dies, and nothing unsettles her more than realizing she left, and the world kept spinning without her. Your healing becomes a mirror that exposes her own lack of growth. She sees you becoming more grounded, more selective, more emotionally controlled. She sees you building a life that doesn't revolve around pleasing anyone. She sees you becoming the type of man she always claimed she wanted, not because you changed for her, but because losing her forced you to build a stronger version of yourself. And that realization creates a quiet fear inside her, the fear that she'll never again be with a man who brings her the combination of patience, depth, and stability you carried so effortlessly. With time, you understand something profound. She didn't break you. She revealed what needed to be rebuilt. She didn't ruin your capacity for love. She removed your illusions about it. She didn't damage your self-worth. She exposed the parts of you that attached too quickly, forgave too easily, and tolerated too much. And as you piece yourself back together, you stop viewing the relationship as tragedy and start seeing it as a turning point. You weren't meant to stay the man you were with her. You were meant to become the man who walks beyond her. Eventually, your life fills back in with new experiences, new standards, new desires. You no longer crave her attention because you've developed a taste for something deeper. Peace, not the temporary kind that disappears with one argument, but the kind that comes from knowing you don't have to earn anyone's love through emotional labor. You want someone who chooses you without needing chaos to feel alive. Someone who values the calm you bring instead of running from it. Someone who doesn't confuse your consistency with predictability. And once you know that level of clarity, returning to her becomes impossible. And that's the final truth most men never realize until they've healed. She didn't choose a better man. She chose a louder fantasy. She chose intensity over intimacy, stimulation over stability, imagination over reality. But fantasies fade, reality stays. And the reality is this: the moment you rebuilt yourself from the loss you caused, she lost the version of you she would spend years searching for in other people. Not because you're irreplaceable in some poetic way, but because you operate on a level her fantasies can't compete with: emotional maturity. That's why she'll remember you, long after you've stopped remembering her. Because the fantasy she chased was fleeting, but the man she left was the one thing she wasn't ready for: real.